to give some more detail about what it means to have a small group of students. So what does this time look like when the students are with the teacher? First, I'll tell you all the materials that I have. I have different books for all my groups of students. So I have 3 groups or 4 groups every day. 4 groups, so I have 4 different kinds of books for them that they're working throughout an extended amount of time. So this book is for one of my groups, and right now they're on chapter 9, and they will continue to read a few chapters every day, whereas this little one, she's still learning how to read, and so she might finish this book in 1 or 2 days. But you can see there's a huge difference between Oliver Twist, which is traditional literature originally told from Charles Dickens, and High Fly Guy, which is a beginning reader book that's a fun story about a boy who has a fly as a pet. So you can have a really clear example of needing different books for different students. I also have graphic organizers, whatever skill I want to teach during that day. I won't go into too much detail about this because it's really different depending on your standards and what you're learning about in your class. But for me, this is something that we're working on this week. It's my lesson goal to teach through this book. I also have my note page. So I put the kids' names all around the side, and while they're reading to me, I write notes so I can remember how they're doing or maybe something that they need to work more on. Here's some extra pencils because I know it sounds silly, but the 2 seconds to have a student go run and get their pencil is 2 seconds wasted of a small group reading instruction. So I always have some extra pencils for them. I also have extra materials in case they need more help. I love using this. If the students are all working on their own writing, I can do an example, but I don't have to waste paper and I can erase it. I love those. The last thing that I have, and I use this more at the beginning of the year than throughout the end of the year, is some phonics flip books. So I have all of the rules of English that they need to know in order to read correctly, decode correctly, and they just practice these sounds. Sometimes I teach them to them directly if they haven't learned it before. Sometimes we just practice. Sometimes we play a game and see how much faster they can do it than before. And I have different levels. So that's medium, this is hard, lots of different levels according to what they need. Now I'll explain to you what I usually do when students come into the center. So they'll come into the center and I'll ask them a few questions about what we're going to learn today. If it's still the beginning of the year, while the students are moving from the other place to here, they're coming from that library center to here, we'll just practice the sounds until everyone's arrived. Now it's the end of the year, so they really understand what to do and we don't need to do these anymore. Then I would ask them some questions about the book from the day before. Maybe it's some questions that I wrote down beforehand, maybe it's not, maybe it's just some questions to make sure they're ready to read this text today. After that, what I'll do is I will take the vocabulary that they need to know for the day or any reading papers. So here's a list of all the characters, or I'll tell them the vocabulary that they need to know before we read it. So here I have a teacher copy of this book, and I'll go through and I'll tell them the new words that they need to know, point them out, give them a definition so that way they know to look for that tricky word while they're reading. Now the students finally get to read. That whole process takes about less than 1 minute. So they come, we do the flip book, we do any warm-up questions, and ready to read. So the students will go to their own place in the book, all of them will have their own book open. And I will be here with my notes, and I will tap like that. When I tap like that, they'll start reading to me, and I have my own book here in front of me to look at what they're reading. Excuse me. I'll look at what they're reading, see if they're reading it correctly, and I might ask them some questions while they're reading, and I'll make notes about their answers or anything I need to remember to teach them in the future. When they finish, I'll ask them all to close their books. I'll ask them some more questions about what they've learned. I align my questions so that way they're the easy kind of questions becoming more and more hard kind of questions, and then I let them rotate and I get another group. My next group will come while they all clean up. I clean up my books, I put them away, and I take my next set of books for my next group, and we begin the process again. So I hope that that was a helpful introduction for you. Again, it really depends on where your learners are. It's the end of the year for me, so my students are reading some higher level books. I recommend, especially at local schools, if you can get one copy of a paper book that you have the rights for, you can copy these really easily. So our school has a subscription to a program called Reading A to Z. I'm not sure if there's something similar in Chinese. And when you have that program, you can order the book that you want. It shows what books are easy and which are hard based on A, B, C, D. A being easiest, Z being hardest. And then you can print many copies without having to buy a lot of books. There's so many more details that I could go into. I hope I didn't give you too many details to start, but just a helpful introduction. Please feel free to watch this video again and try to think of some different things that you can do at your school. Also, please feel free to search on the internet. There's lots and lots of videos. If you search literacy centers for primary or literacy centers for elementary. Bye-bye.